Hello everyone, my name is Susan Song. I am the instructor of the consumer behavior. I am very glad to have you in my class. I hope that this is the fun and enjoyable journey throughout the semester. Again, this is the course of the consumer behavior. And let me show you then what are the overview of this class. If you look at this slide, you can see that consumer behavior model. Model is the abbreviation of the words. So what are the factors that influence consumers' decision and purchase behavior? And if you look at this chart, if you look at this model, you can actually consider all the factors that influence consumer self-concept and lifestyle and their decision-making process. Just briefly explaining the overview of these courses, if you look at the right side of the slide, you can see the decision process. Like there is a situation, and depending on the situation, consumers recognize problems, and then once they recognize problem, they starting to searching the information. Then they find out the alternatives to solve that problems, and they make a decision. And after they make a decision, they use it, and after they use it up, they evaluate their purchase experiences. And how does decision processes occurred? It is actually depending by consumer self-concept, who they are, who they think of themselves, and the lifestyle. Then what are the self-concepts and life cycles determinant? It is where they live, what they do, whom they are interested, etc. Those kind of things are called as external influences. Something exists outside of themselves. But sometimes also those self-concept and the lifestyles influenced by their perception, learning, memory, motivations, personality, emotions, and attitude. That is called as internal influences because it is something inside of the consumer's heart and mind. So, in this semester, I'd like to show you that how consumers behave from the recognition of the problem till the post-purchase processes, and we'll look at, after the midterm exam period, we'll look at what are the things that influence consumers' decision processes. So you will be encountered this CB model several times frequently. Now, then let's talk about the chapter 1. Chapter 1's title is Consumer Behavior and the Marketing Strategy. When you look at the chapter, you have to understand what are the learning objectives. Whenever you see the textbook or you meet the new chapters, the first thing that you should do is that find out the learning objectives, because learning objectives kind of maps that how you're going to study, what you have to study. It is like a core concepts of that assigned chapters. So I ask you to focus on the learning objectives for every single chapters. And if you do understand these learning objectives throughout these courses, throughout these lectures, you're all set. And if you don't understand anything on these learning objectives, you talk to your partner in your Haburuta session and ask each other whether they do understand the concepts clearly. So clarify each other's understanding of the core concepts and the vocabulary. So in the chapter 1, we have 5 learning objectives. Number 1, define consumer behavior. Number 2, summarize the applications of consumer behavior. Number 3, explain how consumer behavior can be used to develop marketing strategy. Number 4, explain the components that constitute a conceptual model of consumer behavior. Number 5, discuss issues involving consumption meanings and form attempts to influence them. Maybe I cannot cover all of the learning objectives, but I ask you to revisit the slides and revisit the textbook, either this Hawkins textbook or other relevant consumer behavior textbook, to understand fully the concepts on this learning objective chart. So, what are the learning objectives of the first week? In short, you can say these 4 things. 1. What is CV? 2. If you understand CV, where can you use it? Where can you use CV? 3. Okay, you are saying that CV model is kind of a short summary of what we have discussed and found out throughout the research journey by consumer behaviorists. So what are the consumer behavior model? Number 4, how do we study consumer behavior? Okay, so what can you see right now? Actually, the pictures and the titles that I put on this slide is from the newspaper. I just found out this kind of articles recently from the newspapers, internet newspaper and paper newspaper. It says that in Korea, M generation is a real thing, global trend of meaning out. Have you heard about the terminology called meaning out? In Korean over there, 등산하고 식수 기부 조기 마감됐다. MZ세대의 나눔의 방식. So they climb, and as they climb the mountain, the companies who are associated with the climbing mountain, they planted the trees in that mountain. So they leverage climbing the mountain activity with the planting the tree in the mountain, like doing something good for the natural environment. And vlogging and beachcombing, that how they do have a fun, like they do the activity, but as they do that, they get the rewards of doing that, and companies who are supporting this activity do the good thing, positive things, positive impact in the society. So it's kind of like called as meaning out. What they do in activity for the fun thing or what they consume, they choose to display their meaning, their values, how they value, what they value. Then if we see this kind of article, if we look at this kind of new behavior, if you see the new behavior of the certain segments or certain human beings, humankind, you will get a question in your mind. Who are they? Who are they? Can you predict the demographics of them, like income, age, gender, marital status? Even more, why do they behave like that? We want to know that. Are they younger people or older people? Are they 20, 30, MZ generation they said, but is it only for MZ generation or for the upper generation? Or are they like gender oriented? Certain gender is more doing this pro-social behavior. How about the income level? So we want to know who are they, and more so we want to know the motivation, their internal motivation, drive to do this behavior. There's another question like this. In these days, the TV show, the trend has been changed. Like in previous generation, the comedy or set up play amongst them was the hot thing. But in these days, it is no more. They do not like the set up play. We do like 관찰 예능, observational entertainment show. So reality TV show, we call it, right? Then we wonder, why do people watch reality TV show? What are the motivation? Why people do not spend much of time to watch set up play? Instead of that, they do love to see just the observation of reality TV show. To understand psychology of consumer, to understand behaviors of consumers, we can understand the motivation of this kind of new trend or behavior and what's happening, why it is happening. Moreover, we can predict what is going to happen. So, in short, consumer behavior is the study of individuals, groups, or organizations and the processes they use to select, secure, use, and dispose of products, services, experiences, or ideas. Why? To satisfy needs and the impact that these processes have on the consumer and society. I know this is quite of the long sentences. But if you carefully examine these words, you will be understanding the scope of the consumer behavior. Yes, when we say consumer behavior, we often think about individuals only, but that's not true. We are also examining the groups and organizations. What are the examples of the groups? It can be a family or NGO, non-profit organization, hospitals, schools, or even the company like B2B, like Samsung, Apple, Microsoft, LG. Those are the organizations as well. We want to know how they behave, study of individual, groups, organization. But the people is not the only one that we care for. We want to study the processes as well. Then what kind of processes is it? When the consumers use the product, we often think that only the transaction of the money and the product is the core thing, but it's not true. We're interested in understanding selecting, why to selecting, what to selecting, secure, use, and dispose, throw it away. The whole process is that we care a lot. Thirdly, our area of interest doesn't lie in products only. It covers from products, services, experiences. What are the examples of experiences? It can be like tour, concert, or like rafting, or like visiting the entertainment park, amusement park. Those things are experiences, like bungee jump as well. How about the ideas? Yes, 세상을 바꾸는 시간 15분, or like TED.com. It's like ideas, exchanging of ideas. Also, we care how does consumer react to those kind of things. Why do they behave like that? To satisfy needs of them. We also have interest in the impact. How does consumption activity would create impact to the world, to the consumer themselves. If you do smoking a lot, if you do drinking alcohol a lot, it will have an impact on them, the consumer themselves. How about the society in general? If there are a lot of smokers existing in the society, it's highly likely to get a cancer or thing. Then what happens? Many people have to bear the medication fee, insurance fee. So insurance fee will be higher because they have to bear the cost of the patient out of the heavy drinking or the heavy smoking. So there can be the small example of the impact of the smoking consumption and alcohol consumption on the consumer and the society. So we'd like to study those things together. So these whole things are the subject and the domain area that we are interested in, the consumer behavior. Now, let me show you in detail what I just said. Consumer activities associated with the purchase, okay, not only just the purchase, use. How do they use it? Dispose. How do they treat them after they finish using it? They just throw it away, or they resell it at 당근 market or 번개장터, carrot market, 번개장터. It's like eBay. You resell the used products, so of goods and services. And how does consumers react to it? Consumers' emotional responses, mental responses, behavioral responses. For example, if you're searching the information, if you visit the store, if you keep the record of it, if you do referral, you recommend the product to your friends, you post it on your experiences after you visit the 맛집, great restaurant, that's the behavioral responses as well, right? So the range of consumer behavior is that your activities and the responses, emotional, mental, and behavioral. In terms of activities can be classified into three things, like gathering and evaluating information, purchasing, you pay the money and get the product, transaction. How do they do that? They use cash, or they use credit card, or they use like Samsung Pay, Apple Pay, Kakao Pay. It does matter how to treat the transaction, or they just use their thumb to make a payment. Or do they purchase warranties? It also matters to construct, to design your products as you understand whether people care to purchase additional services or not. How about the use activities? Where does it use it? When does it use it? How they use it? They eat the ice cream immediately, or they go to home like 30 minutes and then try to eat the ice cream, or they keep it in the refrigerator and eat it like next day or a week later. Depending on when they consume, you have to deliver your product in a different way. Like packaging should be different as well. How? Will they complete the consumption whole as a whole? They consume it partially. In other words, they partially consume today and they keep it later, reserve it later for the later use. Then will it be changing? The taste will be changing and the freshness will be changing. You have to consider that too. How about the disposal activities? Will they recycling, biodegradable waste, or reuse it? Right? That you charity, you donate it to the non-profit organization, maybe temples or church or like poor people, whatever. Resell, you resell to other consumer. So how does consumer react those kind of stuffs? Behavior responses example is that inquiring. Oh, after I hear the first time, there is a like Trom dishwasher or a styler from the LG to organize your clothing, to cleaning up your clothing. And you are getting interested in it. You are inquiring then. Sometimes people trying to get a massage chair. It is quite expensive. Even if it's not good, it will be total waste of the money, and it takes up the time, the space. So before that, they want to try the massage chair before they make a full purchase. So trying is behavior responses example. Buying and recommending. You can think of many of consumer responses. These are something that we do care and we do track. Okay, this is the end of the first video clip. And next video clip, I will explain about who's consumer part. Thank you. Okay, now let's consider who is consumer. I mentioned that it is individual and organizational. So, individual consumers. So think about that. When do you think you purchased goods? Depending on the purpose, it can be classified into two categories. Individual consumer purchase goods and services to satisfy their own personal needs and wants, but sometimes you purchase it for satisfying the needs and wants of other individuals. What are the cases of it? Maybe if you try to give it to the other people as a gift, right? Or you can buy it for the whole family. If you are the like a shopper for your whole family, purchaser will be you, buyer will be you, but user or consumer of the product will be all the family members inside of your family. How about the organizational consumers? Organizational consumers purchase goods and services, but it also can be categorized into three occasions. One, produce other goods to services. Two, resell goods and services. Lastly, help manage their organization. What are the examples? Let's consider the coffee shop entrepreneur. Coffee shop owners purchasing beans, right, to produce the cup of coffee. That's the first case scenario. What else? They may purchase whole cakes, right, to sell the piece of cakes to the visitor. Or they may purchase like, what's that, goods, like mug cup or like dish or like music they played and resell it at the coffee stores. Number three, they may purchase like flowers or they purchase like PC or like speakers to run their stores. So there are many cases of the purchasing the product, but depending on the situation and the purposes, you may need to consider the different marketing strategies because their motivation and their use for different. Thirdly, now let's talk about the reason that we need to study consumer behavior. Why do we study consumer behavior? Number one, usually it helps to improve business performance because we can anticipate and satisfy customer needs if we understand consumer behavior, right? Number two, we also can influence public policy. Why? We can anticipate and satisfy public needs. For example, in South Korea government, we spent like 100조, 100 trillion won over the decades to reduce the lowest fertility rate. However, it doesn't solve yet. It's getting actually lower and lower. They often say that after several years, several decades, the Koreans will be disappearing in the world. But why that happen? I don't think that marketing solution is the only way to solve this problem. It has to be resolved many ways, from the education, housing problem, work problem, etc. However, when the government try out to set up the policy to reduce the low fertility rate, they target long and they provide a long solution in my view. They said that like, okay, if you give the birth, I will give you the money. And if you give the third children, the university admission fee will be the free. Will it make unmarried couple be married? Will it make the couple to give a birth? I don't think so. They do not understand the unmet needs or desires and their fears, how they do not get married or cannot get married or don't want to give a birth, etc. So if we understand consumer behavior correctly, we can create better public policy and then we can make influences in a way that we want to go to. Lastly, it is not only for business performance and public policy, it also helping consumer themselves. If we don't understand what kind of tactics that the marketers does and how do we behave as a consumer, we can have a wise decision as a consumer. It is similarly, I can say this into marketing strategy, regulatory policy, social marketing, informed individual. It is the same thing that I just mentioned. Like informed individual, meaning that you are enlightened, consumers are enlightened, therefore they can make better decisions. They can protect themselves. Regulatory policy number 2, it is about like public policies or regulation, like senior people cannot read small font on the package design, then they have to change the package design to considerate the seniors people. Or for example, like we installed a kiosk in the McDonald's or fast food restaurant, but then it is having a difficulty for the seniors or the juniors and children to use it, or the minor people or challenged people, then we can provide that some kind of the solutions in terms of regulatory policy. For example, like sugar. Once when the carbonated drink, soft drink, 탄산음료, has a lot of sugars in it, and the children didn't know that, and children's parents didn't know that, and people keep purchasing that soft drink, carbonated drink, and take high sugar, high calorie. So after they noticed that, after government noticed that, after NGO noticed that, they requested the manufacturers to provide them nutritional information on the package of those soft drink. It's kind of a result of the consumer behavior understanding. Marketing strategy is obvious. How about the social marketing? Anybody understand the difference between social marketing and marketing? Social marketing is the application of marketing strategy and tactics to alter or create behaviors that have a positive effect on the targeted individuals or society as a whole. Like thinking about that, like preventing AIDS, or do not drink, do not drive after drink alcohol, like that, or 노담 노답. A famous campaign in these days was targeting to the high school student and middle school student, do not smoke. That's 노담 노답 campaign. It is kind of examples of social marketing. The purpose differs, but the technology and tactics and strategies are similar. Purpose of social marketing is that altering the behaviors of consumer, creating the behaviors of consumer in a positive way for the goods of themselves and the welfare of the society. However, those, like, skills marketing skills will be similar. So something that you guys learning from the marketing class, marketing school, this marketing communication can be usable for the NGO and the social marketing, even for the government. I hope that you do understand clearly on this. Okay, have you ever watched this soap opera called 응답하라? 응답하라 1994 is one of the famous series on air at TVN. And I do love the episode of this too. 응답하라 1994, I'd like to ask you to watch these clips. I will be uploaded on the Blackboard. You can go there. I cannot show you in here, but go to watch it if you don't have it seen it. And there is a student who came from the southern part of the Korea, and they was heading to their hometown as the Chuseok coming, like Thanksgiving in American case. Thanksgiving, Chuseok, they went to their hometown, and then they met someone who are selling the watch. And so see that video clip, see what happened. If they have understand what is the psychology that these sellers used, they maybe protect themselves. If you guys have watched this video clip, let me know what are the psychology, what are the consumer psychology, what are the consumer knowledge that these sellers of the watch has used. Okay, prepare to discuss with your partner for this episode. It is interesting. Okay, now let us consider that how does consumer behavior influence marketing strategy? In other words, how does consumer behavior interacts with the marketing strategy? The interplay between consumer behavior and marketing strategy involves 5 stages, as you can see, from the market analysis, red color on the bottom of the screen, to the green color, market segmentation, to the blue color, marketing strategy, to the consumer decision process, and the orange color, outcomes. Let me walk through in detail. The first is market analysis. The market analysis involves gathering data and tracking trend. But what kind of sectors you need to gather the data and checking the trend? You have to consider 4C. Normally, we use the 4C as a model to analyze the market. If you need to Google or research, if you want trend checking, you have to consider these 4Cs. 1, the consumers, 2, the company, your focal companies, and 3, competitors, 4, the conditions. For example, right now, from the 2020 till now, we are from the 2020 and a couple of years, we have spent like COVID-19 situation. How this pandemic conditions has affected consumers? That's something. Or how does technological advances has influenced consumers? How about the company? Like how does Amazon react to this COVID-19? Or how does Google or the Facebook, Apple react to COVID-19? What about Samsung and LG? What are the competitors of those people are reacting to this kind of a new technological advancement and consumers' requests and pandemics, political condition, etc.? So without understanding competitors, if you understand only the company, you cannot identify the good strategy. But although you understand the company and competitor, if you don't understand the consumers, your analysis will be not sufficient. This is like background research. What happened then after you understand the 4Cs? Second stage is market segmentation. Then what is market segment? Anybody knows? I believe all of you already know market segment if you took the marketing course, basic marketing class. Market segment is a portion of a larger market whose needs differ somewhat from the larger market. If the one single market requests one thing, their needs identical, then we don't divide into the small segment. The reason that we segmentize market, the reason that we divide the market is that Each of the segments has different needs and desires and different lifestyle, different demands, different requests on certain product or certain desires. So segment A and segment B and segment C, they are different. That's the definition of the market segment. So firms segment their market and choose a segment or segments that best fit their capability and the market condition. Then how do we